This is your first video for English 3223 Advanced Grammar at Prairie View A&M University. The picture you see here is our textbook. We are using Martha Cohn and Loretta Gray's Rhetorical Grammar, the 6th edition. There are newer editions, there are older editions. All the page numbers that I'm referring to, all of the exercises come out of the 6th edition. If you have a different textbook, please let me know so we can try and figure out where you need to be reading. Your reading assignment, which ideally you will have completed before you watch this video, is not very long. I'm asking you to read pages 6 to 13 in Chapter 1, and then pages 233 to 235 in Chapter 12. This takes us through nouns and verbs. Nouns and verbs are two of the four members of what we call form classes. 99% of our English words are either nouns, verbs, or adjectives or adverbs. So it makes sense that we spend a lot of time in our classrooms going over these parts of speech. How do you know that what you are dealing with is a noun, verb, adjective, or adverb? These are words that can be inflected. This is simply a fancy way of saying you can change their endings, and changing their endings shifts their grammatical role. We're focusing on rhetorical grammar in this class, how our choices are affected by what we're trying to convey to an audience. We are less interested in hard and fast rules. We're trying to figure out how we can express ourselves most effectively and help our future students do so as well. So, nouns. I am sure all of you know a noun's a person, place, or thing. This is a great concept to explain a noun to a young child, but we're talking advanced grammar, so we're going to go beyond this basic definition. The definition that I'm about to present to you has 3 parts, comes straight from your reading, but I like to go over this again. The first thing you need to know about nouns is they can take 2 different inflectional endings. Now, before you freak out going, what the heck does that mean? You can make them plural, or you can make them possessive. A book can become books, or it can be possessive, a book's cover. And this is specific to a noun. You can't really do this as much with a verb, or an adjective, or an adverb. Part 2, as it says on page 8 of the 6th edition of Rhetorical Grammar, nouns occupy the headword position. They're the main part of a noun phrase. And a noun phrase can be a subject in a sentence, it can be an object in a sentence, it can be part of a prepositional phrase. The important thing to know here, even though I've underlined headword position, it can be modified. This is crucial to defining a noun. Nouns are often preceded by what we call a determiner. Determiners can be an article, a and the. It can be a personal pronoun, your book, her toy, or it can be a demonstrative pronoun, this car, those birds. When you see a word like this, it usually signals that there's going to be a noun sooner or later. There might be some modifiers in between, particularly adjectives, but you rarely see an a without some sort of noun further along in the sentence. So this brings us to a noun phrase, which I'll often abbreviate, as our book does, NP. A noun phrase takes a determiner, one of those articles or pronouns, adds a modifier, and then a noun. The big game. This long class. These are pretty fundamental noun phrases that help students start to build more descriptive sentences. Often in the classroom, you're being asked to help students write with vivid detail, to write autobiographical stories, chock full of the perfect adjectives, the perfect nouns. Sometimes just starting with a noun phrase not worrying about the rest of the sentence. Just a noun phrase. To show students you don't always have to start with the. You don't always have to say a big game, a long class. There's always those personal pronouns, my charming mother. One of the things you often encounter when you are teaching English to students for whom English is not their first language, your ESL, your ELL learners, English is not always consistent about determiner use, especially in the middle of a sentence. When do you use a or the, and when do you leave it out? So if you look at our first sentence, I want to go to college. I need coffee. Most of us probably don't say I want to go to the college. I need the coffee. We probably wouldn't even say I want to go to a college. I need a coffee. Although we might say I need a latte. Why is coffee okay without it? Whereas latte, it would sound weird if I said I need latte. Now notice in the second example, I have added a modifier in between my determiner and my head word, my noun. I wouldn't say I want to go to good college. I would say I want to go to a good college. This can be extremely confusing for students who have come from especially China, Japan, Taiwan, where they do not use determiners and articles as much, if at all. And this is why we tell our students to read, to listen to American television, because a lot of this is something you pick up in usage. Here's a complete noun definition beyond person, place, or thing. If I ever ask you to define a noun, this is what I'm going to be looking for. A noun can be made plural and possessive. It's the head word in a noun phrase, and it's usually signaled by a determiner. So you'll notice why people, places, and things fit this definition. Most people can be made plural and possessive. We can talk about teacher, teachers, the teacher. Places, store, stores. And of course there's always things. A cup, the cup's handle. This is from chapter 12. It's another way to think about nouns. If we start at the top, we can break nouns down into proper or common. Proper nouns are things like Houston. Why do we care about this? It's a matter of punctuation. Students are taught as early as first and second grade that you need to capitalize proper nouns, people's names, place names. We can subdivide our common nouns into non-countable and countable. Things like peace and homework. You don't make plural. We talk about a lasting peace. I want peace on earth. Did you do the homework? How much homework do you have? You can't make these plural, but I can make them possessive. I can precede them with a determiner. I can talk about a lasting peace, the math homework. And here's where rhetorical grammar really starts to come into play. Some nouns are actually more versatile than some teachers would like to admit. Because in today's testing culture, we're looking for one right answer. But depending on the context, depending on what you're trying to convey, some plural and collective nouns can be singular or plural. What? Look at these examples, and these are inspired by Coleman Gray's examples in chapter 12. The mathematics involved are difficult. Here I'm trying to stress that there's a bunch of different branches in math. I want to stress its diversity. If I want to talk about it as one complete thing, and it is a tough subject, mathematics is a tough subject. Here's another one. And I choose majority because when we speak, We often say majority of the time or majority rules, and we don't realize or think about the fact that majority is a noun. And as such, it needs to be signaled by a determiner like a or the. I might say a majority of the students are confused. This is what I want to stress, the plural. Really what I'm saying is they are confused. Or I might be referring to the majority as one big block, a monolith. It is correct. The majority is correct. So what do? A student has written a sentence and you're not sure to mark it right or wrong. What do? This is something I'd like to talk about in class. Another thing we're going to talk about are some of these exercises from the book. They're good practice for you to apply your knowledge, but we're also always going to be talking about what grade level would this be appropriate for? And what is the end game? What are we trying to get out of students? Is this effective for teaching something about grammar? So these are 3 sentences from exercise 1, chapter 1, page 9, and it simply asks that you identify all determiners and headwords. So if you want to go ahead and pause this video, or if you just want to use your finger and point and figure out where everything is, that's fine. I'm less interested, honestly, in whether you get this right than what you have to say in class on Wednesday. Is exercise 1 valuable? So noun phrases can occur all through a sentence. In sentence 1, we have 2 noun phrases. The students, determiner, headword. Preceded by a determiner, it's been made plural, student is our noun. And then we have a prepositional phrase, which we'll talk about a little bit on Friday. After their long trip, the determiner, this pronoun there, we've got modifier, long, and then we have trip. So we've got 2 headwords, 2 determiners. In sentence number 2, we have 3 noun phrases. Our new neighbors, determiner our, headword neighbor. Across the hall, determiner the, headword hall. And our best friends. Our is again the determiner. Friends, friend, the headword. Same case for question 4. We've got a huge crowd, the streets, the big parade. One thing you might notice, after you take all of the noun phrases, if we use determiners, modifiers, and headwords, if you take these out of the sentence, there's not a lot left. In question 4, if I take out everything that's a noun phrase, I have lined 4. Again, this is why it doesn't hurt to spend some time talking with students just about noun phrases, because you can build a pretty nice descriptive sentence with a bunch of noun phrases, a well-chosen verb, and a couple of prepositions. Bottom line, do these activities help students? Why or why not? I'm going to ask you to do several quizzes and several activities in this class. Most of them are not going to be multiple choice. They're going to be critical thinking. They're going to be questions where you go, well, I don't know the right answer. Well, heck, I don't necessarily know it either. I'm asking you to come up with an idea and explain it. So it's perfectly okay if in class half of you say, I love this exercise from page 9, it's perfect, I would use it with 5th graders, great, and the other half of you say, no, I wouldn't use this with anyone. That's fine. We can talk about why. We don't all have to agree. So, farewell nouns. We're moving on to verbs. We often describe verbs as simply the action word in a sentence, which can be kind of misleading. because one of the verbs that students rely most on when they're beginning to write is to be. And saying things like she is a girl, he was scared, there isn't necessarily a lot of action going on in the verb itself. So as with the noun, we're looking at a more sophisticated or advanced definition. A verb has three main parts. It has the infinitive, that's the to form, to go, to study. It has the past tense, and I tried to pick some irregular verbs here. Went is the past tense of go, study, turns to studied. And then you have the past participle, which often requires a helping verb. Had gone, had studied. How do you know if you have a regular verb? They have the same past tense, studied, and past participle, had studied. Irregular verbs, went, had gone. Whoa. How do you approach irregular verbs? Are these things like sight words that you just have to memorize and remember? Do you ask students to read selections that have been carefully written and tailored, to be packed with irregular verbs so they start to get accustomed to how things look? Do you ask students to read this aloud? Or do you ask students to listen to famous speeches so they can hear the rhetorical effects of proper verb use? Here are two additional verb parts you should be familiar with. There's the third person singular, or the S form, goes, studies. Usually this is formed by adding an S or an ES to the infinitive form. And then there's the present participle, where you typically take your infinitive, to go, to study, and you simply put ing on the end. Most native English speakers master infinitives, present tense singular, present participles by the time they're around kindergarten age. This can vary if you grow up in a household where English is not spoken regularly or some vernacular is used more often. Irregular past tense verbs are mastered anywhere between the ages of 5 and 11. This is a huge range. Irregular verbs are a huge struggle for your English language learners as well. So you shouldn't be surprised if you have a fourth grader who is struggling with go, went, had, gone. Wait, what? There are some 200 irregular verbs in English, many of them passed down to us from ancient Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon. Fortunately, there are less than 20, less than 15 even, irregular verbs that are commonly used in contemporary English speech. So this is something, if people are interested, we can talk about. What are these verbs? How can we teach them successfully? The odd verb out in all of this, most verbs have 5 forms, to be or not to be. That is the question. We've got 8 forms here, not 5. The infinitive is to be. Then we have our past tense, which was not beed. Was. Oh, there's also were. There's a plural. There's the past participle, been. Third person singular, is. There's also are. Again, most students who are comfortable in English, they've grown up hearing it, seeing it, speaking it, master a lot of your be forms. But this is the only verb in English where our infinitive, to be, is not the same as the present tense. As with our noun, here is our advanced grammar definition for a verb. A verb has present and past tenses. It has an S form, which is not the same as a plural noun, and it has an ing form. A verb typically appears in the middle of a sentence. It's a central, pivotal position. In a week or so, we're going to talk in more detail about verbs, because you're often told use strong verbs, use memorable verbs, use power verbs. What are those, and why do they matter? Once you've got your nouns and your verbs into noun phrases and verb phrases, you can start writing very simple sentences. No, it isn't algebra. Don't freak out. Noun phrase NP plus verb phrase VP equals sentence. Now you might also know this as subject plus predicate equals sentence. How much does our terminology matter? Are students going to be asked to identify a predicate on a standardized test? If so, then we really need to help them understand that a predicate is the verb phrase, typically at the end of the sentence, but not always. Would this whole sentence writing thing make more sense to students if you told them you need a noun part, and then you need a verb part, and you have a sentence? Is that more likely to make sense to a younger audience? Is it more likely to make sense to high school seniors? Because here's an example, very simple sentence with a noun phrase, no determiner, no a and the, my, simply an adjective, great, there's our modifier, and then our noun head word, truths, plural form of truth, and then we have a verb phrase, were spoken, past participle, great truths were spoken. Just because a sentence is short doesn't mean it's not memorable. Short sentences can be incredibly powerful. Often, even college students fall prey to the belief that the longer my sentence is, the smarter I will appear, the higher grade I will get, the more I will impress my teacher, who is, after all, the only audience I am concerned with. Don't fall into that trap. Think about the rhetorical context. Clarity is always more important than complexity. That builds two noun phrases and a verb phrase. John lost his pants. Period. Our noun phrase is the proper noun John. That's it. Our verb phrase has the past tense of lose, which is irregular. It isn't I losed, I lost. John lost. And then we have a determiner, our personal pronoun, plus a plural noun. Once your students have mastered noun and verb phrases, they can really start to build some beautiful, memorable sentences. So now that you've sat through this entire video, you still have one more thing to do. You need to complete quiz 1. It is presented as a Google form. I am asking that you finish it at least 30 minutes before class begins to give me some time to sort through responses and see what questions are, what concepts I might need to review very quickly. Links will always be in e-courses. They will not be released very far ahead of time. I don't want you to be completing these quizzes 5 weeks in advance. Sorry. Again, there are 32 of these over the course of the semester. Each is worth 3 points. 2 points come from finishing the entire quiz and turning it in at least 30 minutes before class. The other point comes from the quality of your response. The point of these quizzes is not, a bunch of multiple choice, which is an adjective, which is that. They're designed to push you to think more critically about tricky parts of speech. How do you teach this? What's the problem here? If you have any questions, please let me know.